Welcome back, Generals, to another Let's Fix General 0 Hour to make the best game ever. Actually, there probably won't be a Let's Fix series. As announced in the previous session, I thought maybe we watch the interview from Dominator with 0 Hour developer Kris Morness. That's the title of the video. I haven't seen it yet. It's 1 hour 11 minutes. And then we can just watch and see if I can say anything about anything. Yeah. Okay, so I have it already open. Let's maybe just kick in, and whenever, it will just pause and we just tag along. Let's see.
The recent release of the source code for the multiple Command & Conquer games has created a lot of hype at the moment, with lots of old players returning to the game and lots of new viewers watching tournaments. Amazingly, one huge result of this is that I've now come across an ex-EA developer in a Discord channel who worked heavily on the General's 0 Hour game. His name is Kris Morness, and you're going to hear from him in a moment, and he worked on many things that we know, love, and use in the game every day. I did have an issue with my webcam here. Basically, I tried to record a Discord call with OBS, and since they both tried to use the same webcam input, unless I cleared the whole of OBS, it was causing a conflict and it did make it look poor. So I didn't want to delay Kris any further. Just wanted to get straight into it, so I do apologize about that. But I think you're only here for the words of Kris anyway, so let's get into it. All right, then. Sorry for the technical issues. Thanks a lot for spending the time to come on and speak to me.
No problem.
I was just thinking, I just want to say two things. Like in 2015, so I set up a YouTube account and I started streaming and making videos on Generals and 0 Hour. And at the time, I was just posting like a few videos here and there. It'd get a few views. And
my first takeaway is that Dominator is quite nervous. Am I wrong? Am I wrong? He's stuttering. He's intimidated a bit, maybe. Yeah, it seems so. I think, I guess it's a high honor to speak to original game developer. I think that is unheard of. There never was a interview. This is a first, right? There never was an interview by a community member for an original developer of Generals or 0 Hour. They probably were from magazines back in the day, but from community, probably not. So it's a big deal, but he seems quite nervous. It's quite funny.
I never thought that 10 years later I'd be speaking to one of the developers who actually made the game. So massive thank you for coming on. And I read one of your notes that you're actually the guy who came up with the idea or invented the worker shoes. Is that correct?
Yeah. It was, I think back with the StarCraft games, if you kept clicking on the same unit, it would eventually get annoyed. And I remember the worker would say, like, can I have some new shoes? And after I heard that, I was like, why don't we just give the worker like a speed upgrade? And everyone was like, yeah, let's do it. So it happened. And it was pretty cool because during development, everyone had ideas, and some things worked and some things didn't. But everyone was involved, which was cool.
Yeah. It's actually kind of funny because every time I'm commentating on games and streaming, I always go on about how worker shoes is like such a good upgrade, and I tell everyone, if you just get worker shoes, you're just going to win the game. So it's kind of like a bit of a meme now. If they just get worker shoes, it's like an automatic win. That's what we say. So it's kind of funny that I'm talking to the guy who came up with it. So
No problem.
So yeah, for anyone who doesn't know, then who are you? I know if you go into the game and you check on the credits, you see your name down there as like as an engineer. So for anyone who's new, doesn't know you, who are you?
All right. Well, I'm Kris Morness. I've been making games since 1997, so quite a long time. I've been pretty lucky. I've got to work on lots of fantastic games. I think I've shipped like 9 RTS games, which wasn't intentional. It just kind of happened. And I'd say the first big game I worked on was Jag Alliance 2. And on that game, I did things like I was responsible for the world editor, the entire strategic AI layer, and auto resolve, which like kept track of bodies and drops and ammo spent and all kinds of stuff. So that was the second project I ever worked on, and it was such a popular game back then that it allowed me to find good opportunities. And so I was able to join EA, work on Command and Conquer, and it was pretty cool because when I was going to school, you know, everyone goes to university, and I remember we played Dune 2000 and the original Command and Conquer game, and it was like, oh, these games are so awesome. And you know, it was a dream of mine to be able to work on it as well. So it was pretty amazing.
Yeah. Cool.
And
cool.
Yeah, and then after EA, I moved to the UK for a couple of years, worked at Codemasters, and then eventually I moved back to the West Coast and worked on lots of different games. And then, you know, I'm originally from Vancouver, BC, and so once I came back, probably in 2011, I joined a company called Skybox Labs, and I got to work on reviving a bunch of RTS games, including like Age of Empires 2 and Age of Mythology, Rise of Nations. You know, just getting everything high quality on Steam, workshop support, ELO rankings, all that kind of stuff. So it was really fun to work on these old games and make them really good. After that, I worked on Craft for a bit and Legends at Blackbird Interactive, and while I was there, I was in charge of procedural world gen.
Wow.
And yeah, it just keeps going. You know, yeah, I've worked on tons of games.
So,
It's a bit like a job interview. Yeah. What did you work before? What can you do? Let's see if we can hire you for 0 hour open source. Let's see if you qualify. Yeah, it seems to have like a large, well, not seems, but does have a large catalog of games on his belt. Yeah, that's 1997. Yeah, these were the Wild West times. Wow. Okay. Yeah, 1997. This is just when the internet started to get big, right? Or not even. It was a very early time. Yeah. Wow.
How many games in total have you worked on? Do you think? I think I wrote in the Excel somewhere 19 games or something like that, or is that even under?
Yes, 19 games and 5 expansions.
Okay. And out of all them games, which one is your favorite?
You know,
my guess will be Age of Empires. Yeah, Age of Empires. Because that was what I picked up on when I read his chats. It sounded like he was a big fan of his Age of Empire remake work. Yeah, so that's my guess. I don't know. Let's see.
I'm gonna say Battle for Middle Earth 2.
Oh shit. Okay. Well, totally wrong. Well, I mean, guess it's probably maybe similar. Age of Empires, Battle for Middle Earth. Yeah. Well, both are strategy, right?
That was my favorite one.
Okay. Cool.
It was just very epic.
Yeah. I did play that for a while as well. So how did you find out about 0 Hour and our community? I know I found you in the community outpost, but how did you come to be in there, and how did you find out about the community?
Oh, there's a guy named Nick Hatter who reached out to me. I made a post somewhere, like once the source code release was out, I was like, oh, I worked on this game and it would be amazing to port this thing to Unreal 5 or something like that. And so he reached out to me and we started chatting, and then he invited me to the Discord groups, and it's been fun chatting with people.
Okay. Have you looked through the source code, and is there any of your code in there that you remember from all that time ago, or not really?
Oh yeah, no, I pawed through it and searched for my name and got a bit of a refresher. And yeah, there were some absolutely hilarious comments. I remember like I did the particle cannon superpower, and we had like this laser draw system, and in there I didn't do cons correctness properly at the time, and we were just validating data and so forth. But a senior engineer on the project basically wrapped it in a preprocessor that says I want to be fired. So then it wasn't defined. So that was his way of commenting it out. Was like, if I wanted to put that back in, then I'd have to enable that essentially. So it was, we were always having fun, pranks and passive aggressive comments and hilarious stuff like that. That was probably the funniest one I saw.
It's funny because just in the previous video or so, we were actually looking at the particle cannon code because of the what was it? The damage calculation separation. We wanted to separate it from the game client, right? I wonder if so, Dominator looks all happy and smiling, but I wonder if he actually understood what Kris Morness was talking about. He was talking about cons correctness. He was talking about preprocessor macros, and my assumption is that Dominator has no clue what he's talking about, but he's happy to just listen in, I guess. Yeah. Well, there's this code banter. Yeah, I mean, there are quite some unprofessional comments in there, which, well, it's, yeah. From what I hear is some people say that this is normal in the games industry, but my experience is not like that. Like, in my experience, it's not that unprofessional, but maybe it's probably different from studio to studio. So, yeah, it's probably, yeah, maybe some are more professional, others not. But yeah, the EA comments, they are quite adventurous, let's say.
Yeah, I have seen some screenshots of some funny comments in there. Something about the Colonel Burton, I think, on the mountain or something. I don't know if you saw that one. There was a funny comment about that.
Don't recall.
No. Okay, so yeah, do you know? So you know the executive producer at the time, then, Mark Skaggs.
Yep. Yeah, I do. He was the general manager, and I guess at the time kind of like an EP.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was responsible for Generals and 0 Hour and I think Battle for Middle Earth Moon.
Okay. Because somehow I've got a hold of him on, and he's agreed to also come on the channel and talk about Generals. So that might be interesting. I don't suppose you keep in touch with him, or it's probably not.
We've chatted a couple times on, just like passing messages on LinkedIn and stuff.
Okay. So yeah, what exactly did you do for 0 Hour? I know you mentioned some stuff. What does an engineer do exactly?
Well, at the time, I was kind of a mid-level gameplay engineer, so I was responsible for basically implementing lots of units. And I don't remember them all offhand. I think I had. Yeah, I worked on like the particle cannon, the nuke cannon, the Chinese one that deploys and undeploys. That one I remember that one being particularly challenging because.
I'm sorry to interrupt here, but yeah, the new cannon is extra bugged. No offense.
All the logic associated with it, because it's a really slow unit. You have to deploy it, which takes time. So like we had all these bugs where you're like, okay, I want to attack this target, and then it starts deploying, and then the unit comes out of range, and then he has like, oh, now I have to pack up and start chasing him again. And they were pretty bad for traveling, I guess.
Yeah.
So eventually we just had to tweak it, and I think like when it did a chase thing, it would get closer. It would try to get as close as possible to be outside of the range of its victim.
Yeah.
So that it would have a little bit more buffer before it would, keep switching back and forth. And I also had to make it so that it could reverse on the fly. So if it was halfway through the deploy, like it wouldn't finish it. It would just like reverse it.
Yeah.
That made a big difference. But that unit was the bane of my existence. There were just so many bugs on that thing. Hopefully it stood the test of time.
And the new cannon still is very buggy, so yeah, the new cannon is sad. I mean, if it works, then it performs well, it does a lot of damage and has good range, but yeah, it has a lot of bugs, like visual bugs, but also functional bugs. Like what he said, like this packing and unpacking. I think every time, like when you put it on guard mode, and then if it needs to retarget a new target, it will pack up and then unpack again before it shoots. So that's, and without even needing to travel, it will still pack and unpack. So the new cannon is quite ridiculous in ways. Yeah. And I think it can shoot further than it can look, at least in generals. I'm not so sure about 0 hour, but in generals it can shoot further than it can actually look. Yeah, well, it's a great unit.
It is a big clunky unit, and sometimes it will set up and fire correctly, and sometimes it'll do weird shuffles, which is probably what you mean fast reversing. And there's a bug with it as well, where you can bring like an overlord with a speaker tower near it, and it will fire 2 shots, and then you can move it away and then to it again, and it'll fire a double shot again. If you understand what I mean.
No, I didn't know about that one.
Oh, damn. Yeah, he's referring to... This bug is caused by the rate of fire is being changed. So when the subliminal messaging is applied to a unit, then the rate of fire changes of the unit, and that will reload the weapon. Maybe not all weapons, but it certainly reloads the weapon of the new cannon, and probably also some other units. And that allows them to shoot straight away because the weapon instant reloads on this rate of fire change. So there's some logic missing that properly calculates a new delta from the rate of fire change for the new reloads. And instead it just reloads instantly, and that's why it can shoot like 2 in a row. Or you can triple shoot, like if you alternate like fast, right? You could build a speaker tower next to the new cannon, and you can just alternate, turn it on and off with a nuclear reactor. So you build a nuclear reactor that just and you don't have enough power to power the speaker tower, but you can toggle the power level, right, of the nuclear reactor. Overcharge it, and then you gain power on the speaker tower, and then the new cannon is shooting, and then you deactivate it, new cannon is shooting again, and so on. You just toggle it, the power on and off, and it just keeps shooting forever. Right? So yeah, it's quite a bug. Yeah, we will certainly fix that in code, no problem. Yeah, we can't fix it right now because we still want to retain retail compatibility for our first releases. So this cannot be fixed at the moment. Well, it can be fixed, but then our release would be definitely incompatible with the retail game. So if you would download our game, you wouldn't be able to play with legacy players who currently use the original installation. But this is something that will definitely be fixed once we get to it. Yeah. Don't worry.
Yeah, it's an abuse players use even to this day.
Yeah. What else? I did the hacker in Black Lotus, or Lotus, whatever her name is. Yeah, just tons of units. And also the terrorist unit, which was kind of hilarious. I remember some good bugs with that one. First time we set it up, I was playing, a 1v1 with another teammate, and I just spammed a bunch of these terrorists, and I think I had accelerated build times on them, so it was like a line of them going across the map. and then as soon as one of them died, it would explode, and then it would cause the next one to explode. So it was like dominoes going across the map that just blew up the whole group of them. So the fix for that was to say, okay, well, only the unit that gets killed blows up, and they can detonate other terrorists nearby, but those terrorists don't chain.
Okay.
Catch them off guard.
So when you say you worked on these units, did you also come up with the unit in the first place, and did you design the model, or was it kind of like the idea was already there, the model was already built, and you just like programmed it to do its thing?
Yeah, you will probably explain this, but typically you have a designer who designs like what it should do. The programmer will implement it, and then there's an artist who creates the visuals, and then a sound designer who creates the sound for it, right? So there are different disciplines that take care of different stuff. The programmer typically takes care of just like implementing the functionality, and sometimes you can have a programmer who also designs things by like offering solutions, right? They just draft implementations, and then the designer tries different things, like tweaks values, or so the programmer can like allow the designer to explore certain things, right? So like setups, like for the terrorists, you can say, okay, here we can have these possibilities for it. It can suicide, or I don't know, it can fly, or whatever, yeah. And then the designer can experiment and see what works and doesn't work. That's a possibility. But typically, you have a designer who says, okay, I have this vision, try to make it work, right? Let's see what he says.
Yeah, everybody had their job. So what I really liked about the team was that the designers were incredibly clear about what they wanted, and they were also quite brief, very high level. So what we'd get is essentially a one-page design. Think like a Magic the Gathering card. You just have some stats and abilities, and it was really, really quite simple. And every programmer that was hooking these things up would be paired with the designer that was responsible for it. And so I would get a card essentially, and then I would look at it, ask a bunch of questions, and we just go back and forth and talk directly. And very, very efficient doing things that way. And of course, artists would take it and they would make the models, and VFX would get hooked up, and sound and all that stuff.
Okay, so you would get the card of, let's say, like the nuke cannon. Are you responsible for building that model as well in the W3D? No.
Nope.
Okay.
No, the artist would make it, and then I would hook it up to the game.
Okay, I see. Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of like building a house. You got the architects are like the designers, the engineers are the ones that build it, and the artists are, I guess, the ones that do all the aesthetics and make it look good.
Yeah. Okay. Any other units you can think of, or buildings that you worked on besides the ones you mentioned?
It's been so long. I don't know. I probably was responsible for maybe 20 to 30% of all the units.
Okay, wow.
Maybe less. I don't know. It's been so long. But like in particular on 0 Hour, there was me plus one other programmer. We were the two main engineers on the project, and we had other programmers that came in and left as well. Especially at the end, we had a bunch of people come in and help. But I think that project was only 7 months from start to finish. And it was a small team, but it was mostly designers and artists. And actually mostly designers, because they just took all the INI files and they just modded everything. And yeah, a guy named John Combs, I think he was the one that came up with the original idea, where he said, let's just fart around. And it's like, let's make a faction that is just lasers and another faction that's just demo and so forth. So that game was essentially just a design mod.
So this is 0 Hour now, yeah? Yep.
Yeah, so we just helped support that. And some of the bigger tasks was the Spectre gunship. I didn't work on that unit, another guy did, but that was a big effort. It probably took about 6 to 8 weeks to get it done.
It's interesting how he describes zero-hour development. I mean, it's reflected in the ini files. There's a lot of copy pasta, and it's quite chaotic. And you see, there's a lot of errors from like blatant mistakes, right? Just from filling the wrong values, just making the wrong assumptions, or just not paying attention when copying a definition from one section and trying to reuse it, right? So typically, what happens is when you have functionality, like even in source code, but especially with these ini files, that there's just a mountain of text, and you don't want to write everything from scratch, right? If you create a new definition for something. So what you do is you just go ahead and copy something existing that closely matches the new thing that you want to build, right? And so you copy that, and then you just try to fit it into the new thing that you're building. But by doing this, you then end up with strange mistakes eventually, right? Because you don't pay attention, because you didn't touch that, you didn't adjust this, right? So and the less time you can spend to like figure and polish all the things that you just added, then the more errors there will be. And in 0 hour, there's just a mountain of errors. And in general, it's probably 2, but I don't know much about that. But general it's probably 2, and 0 hour twice as much. So it's just so much wrong.
Yeah.
And the way to look at the Sage engine was, as engineers, we were essentially building the Lego blocks, and then the designers would combine them. So like anytime there was a new ability, like, the hacker ability, we'd implement that, and then the designers could use it and hook it up to whatever units they wanted.
Okay. So just from my understanding then, the Sage engine, was that like already in development by Westwood, and then it was like they were taken over by EA, and then you guys finished it? Is that?
Mark will probably have much better history on this. When I joined, it was Westwood Pacific in Irvine, and I joined right as the acquisition was finalized. So we were working on Generals, primarily the whole studio, while Westwood in Vegas was working on, one of the Red Alert sequels.
Okay.
So it was, there were a lot of differences. We just 2 different studios working on 2 different games, but Westwood started the Sage engine, but we essentially worked on it full time. It was a fantastic engine for the time.
Yeah.
And actually holds up pretty well today. Just the fact that it was so modular, back when games weren't modular, like today. You get Unity, you get all your components and so forth, and same with Unreal Engine. It's much easier to do modular design.
I agree. I mean, the engine did held up quite well. It's easy to modify, right? So the file formats are pretty straightforward. Models are probably okay. The ini scripts are okay. Probably like what is not so good are the SCB scripts, the AI scripts. That's not good, I would say. They should have been in a text format and not in binary format. Source code looks pretty straightforward for the most part. They do have some dirt there with not like proper abstractions, and like the DirectX code, for example, is all over the place. That's not abstracted at all, so that's a bit of a pain. But they do have some nice abstractions for many things, but not all. So it's outdated in terms of It's the engine is outdated in terms of graphics and performance. Performance is outdated because the game just runs on one core for most of the part, right? So it does not really benefit from modern systems much. And it also has quite severe performance issues, actually. But yeah, these come down to poor implementations, expensive implementations. They made a lot of easy mistakes back in the day that nowadays you probably would take a second look at. But I guess back in the day it was not ironed out, all the things, right? Like it was more the Wild West, and people were just like still figuring out how to implement things the most efficient way, and maybe the algorithms were not all perfected yet, and maybe the data structures were not yet all well understood. Like for example, you see that in the code they very often use STD list, and linked lists. Using linked lists is not something that game programmers do nowadays. If someone uses a linked list, then there needs to be a very special reason for it. But typically, like programmers know that, hey, we need our container elements in contiguous array, right? Otherwise, there will be a performance degradation of some sort somewhere, because data access will be more expensive. So simple things like this, and there probably there are algorithms in there that are expensive, like the path finding stuff. It's expensive. So, but yeah, overall, I mean, it's easy to work on this engine, on the data and the code. I think the code is pretty easy to read. Yeah, they've chosen appropriate variable names for things. They have some comments to explain some things. Function names make sense, right? So it's not a mess. It's a mess in some areas, but it is certainly workable, and it is possible to improve it and fix it up. And yeah, it just takes time. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you're looking for work now. Are you? I know you said something about layoff craze. Is it like that in the gaming industry at the minute, or?
Oh my God, it's been brutal. I've been laid off 3 times in a row in the last 2.5 years.
Wow. Okay.
Like mass layoffs. Things are changing right now. I guess the best way to explain it is we've got a lot of, AAA game development has been going on for 30 plus years, and you get a project, you work backwards, and you're like, okay, we need 60 people to make this game in 2 or 3 years, and you just kind of go through and make it. But what's happening now is, with the open source engines coming out, been out for several years, like Unreal Engine, indie gamers are able to just go in and buy marketplace assets and kit bash stuff together. So you're seeing these fantastic solo projects or tiny team projects that are completely outperforming these AAA games, which are slow and expensive to make.
Okay.
So I think what's happening right now is I've got this term called proper AAA. So if you think about games like, Grand Theft Auto, The Witcher games, Cyberpunk, like huge AAA games with huge teams, those are always going to be successful, or at least, reasonably successful.
Yeah.
But a lot of these mid AAA games companies are really struggling to compete and be profitable. So I think part of the solution is moving to smaller, more scrappy teams, like 12 to 20 people working on one game on shorter timelines, and embracing marketplace assets. There's some incredible quality out there.
Yeah, I see it similarly. I'm not so don't have so much knowledge about the indie game space, but I agree. Like you have these absolute massive games like GTA, right? GTA 6 coming up, right? So uh, GTA is a game. When this drops, then the whole game market is basically dead for a period, right? Because it captures such a big audience. Not everything, of course, but it's like when it's a courtesy from Rockstar that they announce when they release GTA already a year in advance, right? Because then it tells other game developers, publishers, to not release their titles in that time frame, right? Because yeah, it would totally dominate everything, right? And there are a few titles like these, and they have always been like. So, for example, the Diablo franchise, right? That's also a big thing. The Blizzard games in general in the past, or the Call of Duty games. What else? Yeah, there are probably a number of really big blockbuster titles. And you have the sport genre, like the FIFA games, for example. They're also big from EA, right? Yeah, and these will always make big revenue. But yeah, then you have like these other bigger games that are not so much on the radar, and they're just really expensive to make, but they don't capture as much players on launch, and even concurrent players not high. And so yeah, what are you going to do about this? You spend all this time. It's like the movies. The movie industry is the same thing, right? You have blockbuster movies like from Christopher Nolan, makes big movies, right? And but then you have other movies that get a lot of money pumped into, and they flop, right? It's the same thing with entertainment. It's always like this. You have flops that don't pay, and you have blockbusters, and then you have things that break even. But yeah, that's, I guess that's with all products actually, right? It's not just in entertainment. It's, you can produce things that sell well and other things that don't sell well, right? So yeah, yeah.
When you say these, the next level down from the big AAA games, do you think EA falls into that?
No, not necessarily. I like some of their game, the sports franchises and so forth. Those
Yeah.
those are remain popular.
So like the FIFA's,
But
this
yeah,
basketball stuff. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
yeah. I'm not much of a sports gamer myself, so
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Okay.
can't really speak to that. But yeah, like a lot of games, they're just not competing very well.
Okay. What was it like your time at EA? Like, what was it like working for a big company like that?
Well, it was like for me at my time, when I joined EA, I think I had about 6 years of experience, so I was still quite junior. And it was probably the best learning opportunity I've ever had. The team itself, we had so much camaraderie. We got along, we knew what we were making, everything was clear. We were able to execute quickly and basically make these games quite quickly. Um, on the negative, we crunched a lot. Back then, early 2000s, a lot of game companies, crunch was the norm. But at EA, we were working like 6 7 day work weeks, and probably, at least 80 hours a week for months at a time.
Wow.
And it's pretty, when you're young, you can kind of do it for a while, but it became clear that the more you crunch, the worse off everyone is. Everyone gets tired and people are making mistakes. And I still remember this one time, I think I worked like a 14-hour day. It was near release. And, we were like, everyone's fixing bugs. So every day we had to hit 0 bugs. And if we hit 0 bugs, then we were required to stay and play test the game and look for more bugs, which
Wow.
was it wasn't fun, especially if you're really tired. You'd be like, okay, I've done everything. I just want to go home and sleep. And it's like, no, play the game and find more bugs. And it's kind of like, well, should I try to find bugs? Because if I find bugs, that just means we're all going to have to stay later. I don't know. But I remember this one time, I think we were working such long days, and I'd get to work at like 10 in the morning, and then I'd be there till like 2 to 4 a.m. And every day it kept shifting later and later. And one day, I think I went home at like 6 a.m. and I went home and crashed. I was sleeping, and I get a phone call at 11 a.m. and saying, "Hey, where are you? We need you at the office." And I'm like,
Oh
I
my God.
just came home.
So what, the previous day then, what time would you have started?
It started shifting. Like, we'd normally be at work by like 9 or 10 a.m., but then it would just get later and later. So we'd stay later, and then we'd come in later, and then pretty much our day we kept shifting forward.
That's crazy.
And we were doing, we were having catered meals like 3 times a day. And then and then we'd get treats. A famous one was Jamba Juice, and sometimes it was ice cream or sundaes and stuff like that. So they did stuff for us. But I think the straw that broke the camel's back is when they offered to do our dry clean, because we were working so much. We couldn't even take care of our laundry. So
oh my God.
That's quite insane. I mean, I also had my fair amount of crunches in my career, but yeah, but probably not to this degree. But this sounds quite ridiculous, even with like 3 meals in the office, and and that the days will shift. That is outrageous. Yeah. So that sounds really painful, because then you're tired all the time, you're exhausted, you're not doing anything else. There's no work-life balance. Yeah, you probably get things done. Yeah. I mean, they must have had. It's quite ridiculous that they had to keep finding more bugs, and considering the state of how many bugs are still there, I wonder like how buggy would the game have been if they didn't crunch? Probably would have been unplayable. Yeah, that is it's quite remarkable, because the game is super buggy, right? I mean, it does. I mean, there are a lot of minor bugs, right? Small bugs. Those are typically the bugs that the producers will be happy to skip, right? But anything that is a showstopper, anything that is blocking progress, crashing the game, that is typically not cool at all. And performance, I don't know how it was with performance back in the day, but typically, I mean, there was always a strive for like high performance, right? But it probably the target was just, okay, if it runs on 30 FPS in a base, you load into the map, and 30 FPS, you build a couple of buildings and some units, and it runs with 30 FPS, and that was probably good enough, right? Or in the shell map, right? Yeah. And so they probably also had to spend time on performance optimization. And performance optimization, that is a real time killer. Optimizing performance is, because you need to measure, you need to investigate, you need to figure out, okay, what is actually slow. And then you need to come up with strategies to make it fast. And then if you make it faster, you always run risk of introducing new issues, right? Because optimizing performance, it means you need to touch the code, you need to refactor it in ways that it runs faster. And so when you touch it, you eventually make a mistake again. And then, you run into new problems. And then, you might have faster performance, but you might have a new bug, or maybe 2 new bugs, right? So it is a death cycle. Yeah. yeah, the less time you have to get all this thing done, then yeah, it's hard. 80 hours. 80 hours, he said. That is ridiculous. That's more than some CEOs spend at their companies, right? 80 hours. Yeah, I wonder if they were compensated well for these 80 hours, or if they were just assumed over time, and they just worked this but didn't actually get paid more for their time, right? Um, yeah, it probably depends. Like, there are probably companies, game studios, where you don't get compensated at all for the overtime, and there are others where you do get compensated for the overtime. Yeah.
So this includes on generals and on 0 hour. Then you were
Yep.
working at 80 hours a week. So at some points.
Yeah, at some points, and usually it was like, 2 to 4 months at a time that we'd be crunching, and then things would ease off for a bit. In particular, when generals came out, I still remember we had this inside joke called Christmas in February. So because it was launching early in 2003, I think, we crunched all the way through Christmas break. Normally we get like a week off during that time, but we got like half a day on the 24th to go home, and then we got all of Christmas Day, but we were there working crazy hours the rest of the time.
Okay.
So our Christmas break was in February.
Okay.
So we called it Christmas in February for years.
That's crazy. Like, we understand. Well, we think in the community that the game was kind of rushed a little bit by EA, and that's why some things were maybe cut out from the game, like the laser general isn't really that much of a laser general. There's like laser ranger hidden in the code that's not released and stuff like that. Is that accurate? Is that why 2 of the bosses are missing from the game, for example?
I'm not so sure. Like, I don't remember the particulars of that, but we were always experimenting. Like, we'd add a unit, and then maybe there was a technical reason, like maybe the laser ranger didn't work for some reason, so we were like, okay, let's just cut it and keep them.
Okay.
I can't think of any specific examples there, but yeah, lots of stuff in games tend to get cut, and instead of completely removed from the code and the data, they just get commented out or just not referenced.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I've wrote. Did you have any funny stories from when you were working on Generals or 0 Hour? I know you've mentioned some things already, so if you've got no others, that's fine.
No, yeah. So funny stories. Well, I guess the timing of Generals. It was after 9/11. Our game. I forget when the invasion of Baghdad happened in real life, but our first mission was the invasion of Baghdad, and it was complete coincidence. We had no idea. Okay. The game was being worked on, actually, I don't know. Like, I joined like in 2002, so that was definitely after 9/11.
Yeah.
But one of the, I guess, funny stories, it seemed funny at the time, was we had a producer who brought in a spent rocket launcher to use as a prop for a photo shoot for cameos, and like he just had it in the backseat of his car and he hauls it out in the parking lot, and it was at the building, people parked outside, and it was kind of like a like a commercial park, so there were other businesses around. So he pulls out this rocket launcher and starts walking into the office, and there were a couple ladies that gasped when they saw him, and we were really close to the airport in Irvine, so it was just like it could have been bad. Like,
is that legal to have one of those?
Well, it was spent, so it was just the plastic,
okay,
like the disposable ones. So it wasn't live or anything like that, but I don't think most people would have known that. So it was a little funny. And then we always were, because we were working such long hours, at the time I had a girlfriend, and she would ask like how my day was, and I was like, oh yeah, today was awesome. We're working on Anthrax, and bomb trucks and stuff like that, and it's just like we must have, like, the whole team must have been under some kind of automatic surveillance or something. We kept saying all the keywords.
Yeah, I just looked up the invasion of Baghdad, April 2003. So I mean, when?
Okay, so it was. I think the game came out in February of 2003.
Okay. So yeah, 2 months later, the invasion happened. So quite
there
accurate.
were like, yeah, there were conspiracy theories that we were sponsored by the U.S. military as a propaganda game.
Yeah, because the game's banned in China, yeah.
Yeah, and I would say maybe nuking Tiananmen Square might have had something to do with that one in the game.
And propaganda towers.
Oh yes, yeah, it was. Yeah, I don't think the politics holds up well today, but yeah, there was a lot of campy stuff that just ended up being a little too close to the truth, I think.
I think that was one of my questions later. Do you think such a game in today's politically correct world, do you think such a game could be created today with anthrax and propaganda towers and terrorists?
I don't know, but I think you'd have to be careful.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, if it was a remaster, then it might be one thing, but like to create a brand new game like that, I think there'd be some challenges.
Yeah, 0 Hour Remastered has a terrorist removed. Terrorist removed. Anthrax is goo, slime. Nuke radiation is water. I don't know. Drowns enemies. Yeah. Nuke missiles. I don't know. Yeah, this. I think it would be hard to make a game nowadays like this. Yeah, because it's really politically incorrect, so to say, right? It just feeds into a lot of stereotypes with the GLA, especially. With the China propaganda, yeah, it's funny, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. This was a question from another guy actually at Arctic Dolphin. He wanted to know, was there any internal project name that you can remember for Generals or 0 Hour before its name came about?
I actually checked with the group. We have a Facebook channel that we talk about stuff, and nobody could think of any code names. And one of the jokes was, well, we made the game so quickly that we didn't have time to have code names. But I think the truth was the games were pretty obvious what we were making. It wasn't like we were creating completely new IP. Command and Conquer was well established, so when we were working on Generals, I don't know if it was always called Generals when I joined, or we just called it Command and Conquer.
Yeah.
Or not, but yeah, so we made those games. 0 Hour, like, we knew we were making an expansion, but we didn't know what it was called, but we didn't have a code name for it. And then, one day it was just like, okay, we're calling it 0 Hour. It's like, okay, cool.
Okay.
And then for the Lord of the Rings games, I think we just called them Lord of the Rings until we officially named it Battle for Middle-earth, which is probably the longest game name I know.
Yeah.
The Lord of the Rings, the Battle for Middle-earth. Game.
And then isn't there an expansion pack as well, like Rise of the Witch King?
Oh, yeah. It's just like really lengthy names for sure. And then it was like after that, it's like, yeah. And it's like, let's just make CNC3. And actually, that was some fun stuff too, because going from Command and Conquer to Lord of the Rings, it was really exciting for the team because the movies were out, or at least some of the movies were out. It was super popular, and the fact that we were able to work on those games was incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was neat. But one of the challenges, the toughest challenge to adapting to Battle for Middle-earth was replacing all the projectile weapons with a melee system. So we still had projectiles, but melee was actually quite challenging to implement
Okay.
because it just hadn't been done before in that engine. And it was just a lot of the AI had to be set up and targeting and events and stuff like that to work like that.
Okay.
Yeah, it was cool. And there were, actually, I remember a really funny bug in Battle for Middle Earth. I got assigned this bug with a loading hitch, and it was like you're playing a multiplayer game, and the first time a treant picked up either a rock or something. Yeah, no, I think it was maybe a troll picking up a rock to throw. It was something like that. There would be this loading hitch that was like a quarter of a second, which was huge, and nobody knew what it was. So I get this bug, and I start digging into it, and I'm like, "Yep, I can repro this," and it only happens the first time. So then I started digging deeper. It's like, okay, where's the asset coming from? And it turned out to be a sub-object inside a level. So there was, and I opened this thing up, and it was this giant scene with all this geo, and it was literally like castle ruins or a village or something like that. It was just an entire level, and in this level was this one rock that it was referencing. So it had to load the whole level to pull the rock out, and that's what took so long.
Okay.
So that was a funny one.
It's interesting, all the kinds of detail. Like me, just as a player, we don't realize all of this stuff.
I'm surprised that he has such vivid memories of a particular issue. But yeah, this sounds like a pretty egregious issue. Loading a level to get a rock. That's quite interesting. But yeah, I'm surprised that you can recall so many things, because this was 22 years ago, right? 23 years ago. So it's a really long time. I wonder how old he actually is. He didn't say how old he is. He said he started games in 1997. Is his hair blue or is his hair white? It's probably white, right? Yeah, it's white hair. So if I had to guess, how old could he be in 1997? He probably started early, young. Maybe he started at 18, 19, right? Yeah, so it could be 50 maybe. Yeah, maybe he's 50. Yeah, maybe 40, middle 40, end 40, 50, yeah, something like that.
We don't know.
Well, it never shipped. Yeah, that bug never shipped. We see all sorts of stuff that never make it out.
Yeah. Okay, so how come you stopped working at EA then? Was that a decision for you to leave and go to another company, or did the work run out? Or?
Oh no, we still had more projects to go. At this point, I had been at EA for 4 years, and things I don't want to. It was more that things were getting easy and repetitive.
Okay.
It's like you do Generals and 0 Hour, then Battle for Middle Earth 1 and 2, and then CNC 3. Those were the 5 that I worked on. It was starting to get samey, I guess. But on the other hand, I also got a really good opportunity to work in the UK, and I had never been to Europe, and so I decided, okay, let's do this, and lived in England for a couple of years and traveled Europe, and it was a really good experience. And then after that, I came back to Los Angeles and joined Activision.
Okay. So were you in London or in the north somewhere, or?
Well, I was there for 2 years. I was living in Oxford and then West Ealing.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
And it was Codemasters, which is near Leamington Spa, so it was a brutal commute from Ealing. It's like 86 miles each way.
I've wrote here, what is your thoughts on the source code release? Is that something you expected? And also they released like the old testing footage of the Sage engine. and the Steam Workshop update. Do you have any thoughts or comments on that? Is it a big shock to you the source code is out?
That's actually a great question. It would be interesting to hear what he has to say about that. Just before he says, for me, it was a huge surprise. I would have never thought that they would release it. Because it's not something that it's not industry standard that game studios, publishers, developers release their source codes. There are some cases where this happened, like with Doom, id Software, right? They released their source code, and probably some others, but it's rare, and it's a game that is still being sold, right, in this Ultimate Collection bundle on Steam and the EA app, right? So to then open source that thing, that it is remarkable. It really is, because I mean it is remarkable because simply it's not a thing that most studios do. That's it. Because there's no incentive, right? They don't gain anything from it. Like, they don't make a direct revenue. They do benefit, I guess, if like the community really uses it for great things and really helps make the game more popular, and then helps getting more sales for the original games. Then I guess it could be worthwhile, but you cannot make this assumption, right? I think if someone publishes their code, then maybe you think, okay, maybe it does more harm than good, right? In some ways, right? There's always a chance that maybe it's used for purposes, for things that it's not desirable, right? But yeah, it's such an old game by now. Then maybe they thought, okay, this game has exceeded all the revenue targets, and it has run its course, and anything is extra because it has paid for its initial development costs, it has paid over the years, and it's good to go. Because as far as I'm aware, I don't know, I don't actually have numbers. It would be interesting to see some numbers for this game, how much revenue it actually made. But my impression is that Generals and Zero Hour, that they actually sold really well. It would be really nice if someone can figure out sales numbers. I would be really interested to see this. I did see this one GameSpot article on archive.org where they said that the projected cost for Generals was $10 million back in the day. So 10 million, and then maybe Zero Hour, I don't know how much would that cost, maybe 4 million. Yeah, so let's say 50 million cost, if that number 10 million was accurate even, right? 50 million, that's not that much. So if they sold 30 million, 50 million worth, right, then yeah, would have been a great deal, right? Yeah. So in that regard, the source code release makes sense, right? If they made all the profits and it all went well, then it makes sense. But overall, I would say, yeah, it is a surprise, and it probably was a surprise for most other people. Let's see what Kris says about this.
No, not a shock. I had no idea it was coming. It was just suddenly it happened. So I think it's cool. I've also had a source code release on Jag Alliance 2. That came out like maybe 10 years ago. And it's always fun when those come out, because then you get to see your old code and you see all the comments and all the things you forgot and how much you've grown as a programmer since working on it. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Okay. So you say you're in this Facebook group. Are you or any of the other developers that you're still in contact with surprised that there's still like an active community for Generals and Zero Hour? Because like later tonight, there's going to be a stream in just a few hours. I don't know if you'll tune in or not. It might be cool if you pop up in the chat. People would probably love that. but there's probably going to be like 1,500 live viewers watching a grand finals of 0 Hour. Does that surprise you, being so many years down the line?
No, it doesn't. Yeah, like working on Age of Empires 2 on Steam, like it was incredible, like how many people play the game and just how the community lives over time. So I actually got to really experience the revival of Age 2, even though I didn't work on the original game, but it was also one of my favorite RTS games.
I'm actually surprised about this statement from him, that he is not surprised about the activity, because I think actually it is exceptional, because if you look at just Generals, not 0 Hour, the community is nothing of that size. And if you look at the other games, like the Command Conquer 3, Tiberian Wars, Red Alert 3, they also don't have this community engagement. As far as I'm aware, I have to say I'm not so involved in there, but the view I have on this, that they don't have this kind of activity that the 0 Hour game specifically has. So I'm a bit surprised that he is not surprised. Yeah. But I don't know, maybe he just has also seen other titles that had this kind of activity, like Age of Empires or so, right? So it could be that from that angle, he just assumes that this is normal, that older games still have an active community going for them. But I wouldn't say that this is granted. You can have old games and they're just dead. And I would say that that's the case for most games. For most old games, they're just old and dead, and no one plays them anymore. Or maybe just the occasional 1-2 players every now and then. But yeah, I would say it's not something that is for granted. Yeah, because you need to keep in mind that 0 Hour, in general, they also have a lot of technical issues. So the barrier to entry is also quite large, right? Because it is so hard to get the game to run on modern machines with modern Windows versions and updated hardware, and the crashes on boot, and all sorts of problems, connection issues, and you have the bugs that are embedded in the game you can't work around. Like the mismatches, and so like it has a lot of technical issues. But then to still have so many players still looking beside that and still thinking their time into this, to me it is surprising. So I'm surprised that he is not surprised, but okay.
Yeah, I remember playing Age of Empires 4 when that came out, and that was a bit popular in the beginning, but then I recently, a few months ago, looked at the stats, and Age of Empires 2 is still the dominant one, yeah? Yeah.
I think it had the best mojo, like the balance, the pacing. It was easy to understand, like just the paper, rock, scissors of different types of units. But yeah, that game was, I think, one of the holy grails of RTS games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, there's differences too. Like if you take Command and Conquer, it's a much faster paced game. Age of Empires 2 is kind of in the middle. And then you've got these really slow paced RTS games like Rise of Nations, where games can last a long time. So yeah, there's different styles for different gamers.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so yeah, it didn't surprise you then that the source code got released. Why do you think EA did that? Is it a way to, why would they do that?
That's also an interesting question. Before we hear the answer of Kris Morness, let's speculate. Why would they do that? Yeah, I already asked this previously. Like, okay, there's no monetary incentive. My impression is, what is the reason? That's a good question. Why would they do that? I think it has to do with 1-2 people probably pushing it at EA, like the CC Hyper guy, probably convincing the Jim Vicella guy, and then Jim Vicella making it possible to hire ups, right? So they probably, I think that they probably looked at the state of the game. They saw the games are buggy, and I mean it's not a secret because we also tell EA, hey, the games are buggy, right? The community does it, right? So they are being made aware of the games are buggy, players struggle, and then the goal can be, okay, you know what? You fix it. You are the community and you're the players and the developers now at the same time. You fix our products because we don't want to spend any budgets to fixing up the games anymore, right? On that note, I in 2021 or 2022, I did reach out to EA. I actually did write an email to the CEO, which was, what was her name? Laura something. I don't recall the last name. Laura something. That was the CEO. Maybe still is. I don't know. She also worked on generals at EA. And I wrote to her, and then she forwarded me to some other guy that was producer or so, I don't know. And then like there was just a brief chat, and Jim Vasella was looped in, and basically I said, okay, General 0 Hours in a sorry ass state. What can we do to fix this? Can we work on this? Can we do something, right? I didn't really put myself forward as a contractor, but I said like, okay, I would be able to fix like most of the things, but we need the. I didn't actually say like we need the source code, but I mean it is kind of implied, right? That I would work on the source code and fix things, right? Because with data you can only fix so much, and with data you can only you can fix some bigger issues, a lot of bigger issues, but not the most critical ones. The most critical issues, so everything was crashing, was mismatching, problems, debugs, and performance issues, all this kind of stuff. That's all code, right? So in data you get like logical issues, like setup issues, gameplay issues, art issues, audio issues, map issues, stuff like this, right? But it amounts to something, but these are not the most critical ones. To fix the game properly, you need the source code. And yeah, my hope was back in the day, in 2022, that EA would maybe, open the dialogue and see, look, what can we do? But that didn't happen, which makes sense because it won't be a priority to for them to spend any resources onto the game, right? So yeah, then I guess maybe now they said, okay, there are people who want to fix up the games. I don't know if 0 Hour is like specifically in the spot. So I know that from this also ties into the Time, aka Time development from Assembly Armada, right? Which started reverse engineering. It was Omniblade, Thompson's 26, and Jonathan. They started reverse engineering 0 Hour in 2017. Yeah, early 2017. They already started. And Omniblade did a lot of legwork in the start, and Thompson's. And so there was always a big desire to like get 0 Hour up into a state where we can really start fixing big, right? And I think for CNC Renegade the same is true, and that one was actually completely reverse engineered, and that was having that one did actually see updates from the community to fix the game and make proper releases, community releases. I don't know about the other titles. I don't know about Red Alert. Is it Red Alert 2 or just Red Alert? Red Alert, and there was some other game, right? It's CNC Renegades, Red Alert, and some other game was released together with 0 Hour, right? But none of the newer titles like the CNC 3. So my assumption here is that they did recognize that there are efforts to fix up the older games, especially with 0 Hour, because I think that was quite visible, right? I mean, I reached out to EA. Now, I don't want to credit myself for moving anything. As I said, it was 3 years ago already, so it was not directly related to that or anything, right? But they probably noticed that there is a desire from multiple angles, from multiple people to fix up their games, right? They did recognize that there are technical issues. And this was probably the way to say, okay, you know what? They have troubles. We cannot fix these troubles. Let's just release a code and let them have that figured out, right? Okay, let's see what the Kris Morness says.
That would be a question for Jim. I don't know. Maybe opening it up just allows the mod community to really dig in and update things.
Mm-hmm. And then
I do remember there was a Generals 2 development attempt that I wasn't involved in that. I don't even know who worked on it, but all I know is that it was announced at one point and then the game got canceled. So maybe this is the next best thing to do is just open up the source code.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I suppose it's a way to bring in sales without releasing your own update. You're giving the community a chance to improve it, to bring in the sales. Have I understood that right?
Well, no, I don't know. Like, once it's open up to the community, then, you know, there's... I don't think it's about money at all.
Okay.
I think it's just letting people play a classic.
I agree with that. It's not about money. But I do wonder, I mean, we cannot see into the future, but I do wonder if we polish, fix up the game real well, I do wonder if we can grow the player population and then also increase the sales of the game. I do wonder, like, I mean, we won't benefit from this, right? The EA is a beneficiary of this, right? We only would benefit in like larger player numbers, right? And having the power to upgrade the game ourselves, right? And like keep fixing it, keep maintaining it, right? So we have this, but we don't own the IP. We don't make any sales. So this is not like an indie game where you could make your own game and then you can sell and then you can grow your team. You can hire new employees because you do have a revenue stream. You can add monetization. You can sell the game, right? So we can't do this. So the only thing we can do is ask for donations, and donations are small. They are small, especially now because there are. We don't have like thousands of players who are willing to spend money, right? So donations are sparse. Yeah. So you can't really fund development. So all the work that goes into the game is from fans who just don't have a monetary incentive and you just do it for passion. That's it. We will see how far this will get us. I mean, there are passionate people, and I count myself into that as well. But it's financially, it's not a good, it's not a good bet, right? It just takes so much time, but yeah, there's no gain from it. But yeah, I guess I can say for myself, like for me, it's just I just enjoy it, you know, and I can probably also learn while doing it, because I never actually professionally I never worked on a RTS. So 0 Hour is the only RTS that I have contact with this genre. So yeah, it's for me it's interesting and enjoyable, and yeah. So I wouldn't want to do it any other way. But obviously, it would be much better to actually also get paid for the work, right? That would be. I think the best case scenario really is that you love what you do, and I think there's two things. You can love the kind of work you do. That's one thing, but you can also specifically love the project that you work on. So these are two separate things. You can love your craft, but you can also really love the project. And if you have one of these things, if you just love the craft, but you're not really into the project, that's one thing. It's good, right? But it's not the ideal case. The ideal case is really if you love your craft, but you also love the project. That is when you reach peak performance, because then you cannot stop working. You just keep on working no matter what, and you keep on pumping out the best work you can. You love the craft, you love the project. And for me, that's the case with 0 Hour. I love the project, and I love the craft. I really like programming. I like to do texture fix-ups and testing the game, and fixing things, and performance investigations, optimizations, stupid bug fixes. I love all this stuff. And so as long as I keep enjoying it, I'm happy to do it. And yes, you need these kinds of people. There won't be a monetary incentive. At least that's what I'm not seeing it right now. There's no like development fund or anything being created. But perhaps that would be a possibility if like the community would grow more and there would actually be like a development fund being opened and people would actually care to donate to that thing, right? So right now it doesn't exist. Below my videos, I do have links for like donations and like even my Patreon I opened a couple of weeks ago when someone asked for it. But yeah, this just gives crumbs, right? It's not really serious. Like with serious, I mean like really like a fund that can like really fund serious development time, right? So that it actually properly buys programmer time, right? Like pays for programmers. We don't have that, right? But it's also not so much necessary if you have the people who are passionate, right? Okay, let's go on.
Okay. Do you watch any 0 Hour streams? Do you follow any tournaments or do you watch any other games, in fact?
I generally don't watch tournaments. I was more active with H2 with tournaments. I was working on like an unlimited spectator mode because a lot of these games, a spectator takes a slot, and you have if you want to do a 4v4, you can't do that in tournaments because one of the slots has to be an observer.
Yeah.
So I actually wrote a way to fix that.
So you implemented that for H2 then? It has unlimited observers now?
I don't know. I left Skybox Labs after I implemented it, but before it went out, so I don't know if it actually made it out.
Okay.
But the approach I took was we had a replay system, and what I did was when a game started, the host of the game, it's peer-to-peer, so somebody, the host, would host a UGS, like a user-generated content, and it was essentially replay. So I modified the replay system so that it could stream in real time with a delay. And then once a game was hosted, then people could spectate games and they'd get published in a list, just like a lobby. And then you could join that game, and then all you're doing is subscribing to the stream. And then as the game is playing, it just keeps updating it. So you're following behind with a delay, because it's quite easy to cheat in a situation like that. So if you have like a 30-second delay, it'd be easy for someone playing a tournament to just have another screen with the replay on it. So I think so it was configured like how long you wanted the delay to be.
This is interesting, and certainly this is a feature we also want for 0 hour, because there is a problem with spectating. Like if you have a tournament and you have the observer or multiple observers, multiple streamers, they do increase the latency, right? And you can only have so many, right? And then you have connection problems and all the sort of thing, and you need to arrange with the guys, and right. So having this unlimited spectators that can subscribe, and the way he explained it, that absolutely makes a lot of sense. You have someone, you could have anyone, you can have all the guys just stream their replays, right? And that you can then subscribe to and then just jump into. I wonder how they implemented it, though, that starting the replay. So if they would upload their replay and then it keeps adding to the replay, and then you can just load it, and as you play it back, you just get new data, right? So it's fine. But I wonder, like, how would you be able to like jump in the middle of a replay? Like you still need to simulate from the start of the replay, right? Because your game state needs to get into this advanced state of the replay. You cannot just jump into the middle. So you can probably have like a fast forward that is maybe invisible. You just like fast forward really fast toward the state, and then visually then you jump into this advanced state where you're close to like the live action, right? Yeah, that would probably work. You simulate forward without rendering and really fast. You just calculate forward, and then you're at the latest point, like with the YouTube videos, you're at the latest point, and that point has a delay, right? Because you want to avoid the cheating, with some delay, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, whatever. Yeah, makes sense. It would be great when we have this. It's certainly something on the roadmap, but it's nothing for short term. This is more a longer term feature, because there are more important things to do right now. Right now, the most important is stability and like all the side tasks for building up the foundation and other architectures, platforms, and so on, right? So, stability is most important. And then bugs, and eventually, once a game is really stable and nicely running with everything that was originally there, then we can explore all the nice features. And the problem is that with new features, they will take like time to implement. They need to testing, and they can introduce new bugs because you need to touch this and that, right? So there's always a risk. Once you add more stuff, you risk breaking more things, right? So I think for now it's important that we stabilize the game so that players can enjoy the original game, but without the bugs. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in 0 hour at the moment, a big thing that keeps it going is just private donations we get to the game. So, for example, in 2024, we had the World Series that's hosted on Game Replays, and the prize pool reached like $13,000 or $14,000. Does that surprise you? If the viewers don't surprise you, does that surprise you?
Not too much. I mean, there's been some games with huge prize pools as well, like, of course, like games by Riot.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think Age of Empires 2 also had similar prize pools.
Yeah.
For their bigger tournaments.
Yeah.
Kris Morness is not surprised about anything. You could probably say like, General 0 Hour has 1 million concurrent players, and you would say, yeah, I'm not surprised. It totally makes sense. I worked on the game. I implemented all the units here, and it's a great game. Of course, there will be 1 million players. Or you could say like the prize money is $1 billion for a one match 1v1, not surprising. The winner takes all. Of course, it makes billionaires. Kris Morness. Okay, good.
Do you still follow H2 the competitive scene now and watch tournaments now, or not really?
No, it was more when I was working on it.
Okay.
Because I was much more active with the community back then.
Okay. So I think I follow a guy on Twitter. I think it's Viper. I think he's one of the best players. I don't know if you know him or not.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah. Okay. Do you know why the 0 hour speed is linked to the FPS? And I think it's one of the only games I know, or the only game I know. Why is it linked to the frames per second? Do you have any info on that?
Well, at the time, network play was still quite slow, like internet speeds and because nowadays just go on Steam and you play anyone in the world and it's crazy what you can do now. But back then networks were a lot slower. So the key thing was to reduce how much traffic there was going over the network, because it's peer-to-peer. When you're playing 8 players, everyone's talking to everybody. And what you do is you send all the input data, like I selected this group of units, I told this selected group to move to this point or attack this thing. So when you're sending that kind of data around, all the other players basically process it and reproduce the simulation deterministically. And that's what desyncs are, is when 2 different computers disagree on the state of the game. And it's always frustrating when they happen, and they're notoriously difficult to fix.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of good tooling and some time and repro and iteration to really nail these things. So one thing that people might be surprised was the sim rate that we had for that game was 5 frames per second, which is like unbelievably low. And people can't understand like how can you do a fast-paced RTS with that. And a good example was the gunship, the Apache. When it did the Vulcan cannons, you see all this stuff and it's just like the blizzard of bullets. But what you're actually seeing is, if you watch the health of the unit that it's attacking, you see the health get cut down 5 times a second.
Okay.
So that's your sim rate. And then the client rate, which was locked to 30, or up to 30, was capped at 30, I guess. People could play the client as fast as they could up to that rate. And I guess 30 frames per second was considered okay back then. But nowadays it'd be pretty brutal.
Yeah. So now the source code is released, and we've got a bunch of developers. I think there's like 150 volunteers going through the source code and working on all kinds of things. We know all too much about mismatches and the lag issues and stuff like that. But now we've got access to that source code. How easy do you think it is for someone with the knowledge to improve those things, improve the speed, improve the desyncs?
Okay, that is a great question. I find it interesting that he says 150 people looking into the code, but I mean, realistically, that's also what I saw. That apparently, so many people signed up, like on the community outpost, like, okay, who wants to join as developer? But the thing is, there's always more people interested in doing something than people actually doing something, right? So you can have 150 people interested, but you can probably divide that by 90%, cut 90% off, and those people will drop out. You're left with 10% people maybe. And then out of these, you will have some people who will sink a lot of time and others who maybe just a little bit time, right? So I don't think that number means much. How easy will it be? So from my perspective, before Kris Morness gives his estimation here, from my perspective, I don't think there is anything that is impossible to fix or improve. Right? So that we can implement, we can fix anything, we can optimize anything, right? So everything goes. Some things will probably be harder than others. Some things will be more time intensive than others. Some other things will require more testing than others, right? So it's a matter of like, okay, how much effort is this, right? How fast can we fix it? there's already a lot of knowledge of what is broken in the game. So we have a lot of intel of what we can do. We have a lot of tooling that helps us find the problems. There's a lot of debugs in the game that helps find issues. So I don't think there's a shortage of finding ways to figure out the issues and figuring out what the issue is and then fixing it properly, right? So it's just a matter of time. It's just a matter of time. Obviously, the more people, the more competent people you can throw at this, the better. Right now, there's a handful of people working on things. Yeah, I think it's not challenging, but it's time consumptive. Yeah, it takes a lot of time and effort, but it's not rocket science, I would say. At least not for people who know what they're doing, right? Yeah, it depends on the skill level. Yeah, if someone is a beginner, then it's probably intimidating and hard. But if someone is experienced, then it's relatively straightforward. And the code, as I said earlier, is pretty easy to look at, easy on the eye. So yeah, it's nothing that should be too worrying. It's just a matter of time. Let's see what Kris says.
Well, so during, I think it was Battle for Middle-earth 1, I inherited the whole desync system, and the state of it in general in 0 hour was we had this like command line flags, and you could do something called like a deep CRC, and what that would do is set the game up so it would save the state for every player every frame. And then when the game desyncs, you basically load those up, and these files just got absolutely massive. And then you would do a binary compare on them and try to find the difference. And because it was a binary save, you had to go in and figure out all the structs and like where it was and what the value was and what it referenced, and then try to look at the code to see like what caused it. And we would do a lot of things like printf debugging, where we would add additional stuff so that it would save more data so that you can find out like choices and, you know, what paths were taken and uninitialized values. Like anything could happen. And even, you know, like the dreaded float AMD versus Intel, you know, you get round off errors that accumulate over time, and then once you get a different value, you get a desync. And on the retail version of the game, it only checks the CRCs of the different systems like once every 100 frames. So the problem is when it desyncs in retail, you know, 100 frames is several seconds of gameplay, and then it's like the game desync, nobody knows what happened 3 seconds ago. So it's difficult to solve that. So in Battle for Middle-earth, I basically took that system, I converted the saves to be human readable so that they'd be faster to analyze, but I also put them into memory files instead of writing to disk, because writing to disk is super slow. So essentially I kept a buffer, like a history of like the last 30 to 50 frames, and it would just write to memory, and then once the game desynced, it would save all that out. So the files were smaller, but most importantly, the game wasn't a slideshow when you played it. You could actually play at pretty much the same speed as everyone else.
Okay.
I'm actually wondering if Dominator understood everything that was said. Printf, debugging, CRC. What else did you drop? It's a bunch of technical terms, right? And that I think for non-programmers, when they hear this, then there's probably a lot of question marks. So yeah, you need a little bit of technical know-how to really understand what Kris Morness said. I wonder like how many viewers actually really understood everything he said. It's probably not many. Yeah. We have Helmut Buhler actually did investigated the most of the CSC related debugs so far from the community people who looked into the source code, and he's currently working on a headless mode for the game so that the game can run without rendering, without audio, without input, anything. So basically the client just runs and is able to run the game logic. So it's able to run replays, and then we can like check replays by just running the process, but it's not, you don't see it, right? But the logic is run, and this way we can iterate faster on certain replay checks to see like, okay, if we make a new build, do we actually mismatch with the retail version of the game, right? Things like this. So it's certainly there is stuff in 0 hour. There is debug. We can use it. We can figure out if we break the compatibility with the retail game. We can see if something is mismatching. Certainly is possible to fix things once we figure out exactly what is causing the mismatches. Yeah, uninitialized variables. Yeah, that's one of the issues. Yeah. What I've seen is what they did in their low-level memory manager, game memory, and their allocators, is that they zero initialize all allocations that go through the memory pool stuff, the game memory, which allocates, I think, everything pretty much. Yeah. So everything that is being allocated is being zero initialized. So they have been extra careful in that regard. It does not fully solve all the uninitialized mess, because stack variables still can be uninitialized, and there are some of these cases. But yeah, they try to play it extra safe. Let's just zero initialize everything. Yeah. Yeah, interesting.
So Generals doesn't have that code.
Yeah, there's
so
been
that's the approach I would take.
There's been so many times where we're in a big tournament, we're in a grand finals, they've been playing for 40 minutes, and then we get the dreaded mismatch screen. That's happened all too many times.
Yep.
So for anyone like without the knowledge or the deep understanding of this, could you explain, like on a simple level, a typical example of why a mismatch might happen? Is it because I've got an Intel and someone's got an AMD and their PC is working it out differently, or?
Yeah, that's one common situation. But most of the time it's like something is wrong with the code. I specifically remember one of the toughest desyncs I ever fixed was on Battlefield Middle Earth 1. We had a particular level that had animals that would desync every once in a while. It was super low repro. Like we might see it once every 2 weeks. So it wasn't super high priority until we got close to shipping, and then it was like all hands on deck. And at the time we had about 60 QA, and like these poor guys were just playing the game all day, every day, trying to get this repro. And then once we finally caught a desync, then I would be able to go through the logs, diff them, and get closer to the problem. But because when you're saving the game, you're not necessarily saving everything, and there's a lot of transient values that could contribute to the state. So you have to kind of figure out, okay, well, what caused it to go here? So you end up injecting additional logic to record extra data, and essentially print up debugging. So in this case, it was an uninitialized variable that caused it, and when you had an animal, we had these fenced-in pens, and the very beginning, it would pick a random position for a unit, or like every time it would pathfind, it would say, I've reached a destination. It would just do a wander AI, like pick a random point to move to. But that initial state was like a random position that was uninitialized. If that position happened to be valid inside the pen, that's when the desync would happen.
Okay.
And so once we found it, then we basically added some code to initialize all our floats to magic numbers, like dead beef or something. And then we would just check for that. So basically wrote a wrapper for that, and then we ended up finding like 3 different places where we had similar problems and basically fixed them all at once.
Okay. And what? Yeah, go on. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, you know, the network guys initially were really responsible for all this stuff, and that was the majority of their work, was just finding and fixing desyncs. But almost every time it was the fault of someone on gameplay just doing something silly or not understanding the ramifications of their code. So it was a really good learning experience, because it was like, you know, everyone just assumed, oh yeah, the network guys have to fix it. You know, it's their domain. But in the end, it was all about learning from the mistakes and educating the team. You know, so every time there was a desync, you know, there'd be a postmortem, and I'd write something up saying, okay, this is what caused it, this is how we fix it, and this is how we're going to prevent it from ever happening again. But it also served as a teaching moment for other people on the team, so they're like, oh yeah, good to know, so that we don't do this.
It's a really interesting point. My expectation is that the same thing will happen with community members touching certain pieces of game logic when they want to fix something or they want to add some new functionality, that they eventually don't do it quite right. And that can happen to me as well, because maybe I don't pay attention, or maybe, you know, I don't have a full understanding of something, or maybe I just don't understand some things yet that are critical for this, right? Since I'm also not an expert on RTS development yet, right? So, you know, there's probably potential that we run into such issues as well when we touch things or add new things, right? But the positive is that there is already a lot of code to look at, right? So a good thing to learn how something works is to see how other implementations nearby function, right? And then you understand, okay, this is implemented this way, I want to implement this new thing. If I understand how it's implemented in all these other places, then I should be able to build something new that borrows similar principles but does a very different or slightly different thing here, right? So it should be possible to understand how things need to be correctly set up, given that there already is so much substance that you can learn from, right? And this accounts for everything, like all the stuff in the ini files as well, of course, right? But yeah, in code, like there's just so much already that you should be able to infer how something works, right? Even if you don't fully understand it from the interface of the implementation that you actually use, right? But you see, like, okay, this update module, can I see some examples how it's used by other units, you know? And then you see, okay, Black Lotus works like this. I add this new infantry guy that works similar to Black Lotus in some ways, and then you can learn from that, and you can use it. It would probably be harder to do, for example, if there were no infantry units in the game, then it would probably be harder to add a new infantry unit, right? Because there simply wouldn't be one yet to begin with, right? But since there already are infantry units, it's probably easier to add a new infantry unit, because there's already so much about infantry, right? So yeah, as long as we don't steer away too much from the original game, then it's probably safer. But yeah, if you wanted to make, I don't know, if you wanted to implement, let's say ships, for example, marine, fights on the water, right? Then it's probably more challenging, because there are boats, but there are no there are no faction units that are boats and can fight and so on, right? So there might be troubles, some unexpected troubles. Yeah, maybe not.
Okay. What's the benefit for a company to ship a game, and when we connect to each other on the multiplayer, it's peer-to-peer, whereas most other games I know you join a server and you don't experience things such as desyncs. Why would a company go in that direction? What's like the benefits?
Well, okay, so RTSs during their heyday, like 90s, 2000s, they were super popular back then. Internet wasn't fast enough to handle the volume of data, because when you look at a client server game, like Unreal Tournament or something like that, you only have a few people who are actually simulating data. So there's a lot less data that you have to track, but the data that you track on a client server is much more detailed. Whereas in an RTS game, you can have hundreds, if not thousands of units, and to replicate all their state across the network would not have performed well enough at all. If I were to do an RTS game today, it would just absolutely be client server, because internet speeds are there. The server is authoritative. Get no more desyncs, because desyncs it's a full-time job for at least one person.
Yeah, it doesn't sound too fun, to be honest.
It's fun. It's like each one is like it's like solving a murder mystery. It's like, what happened, who done it, how do we find it and fix it?
So do you know Jim Vasella then?
Yes, he was just a little kid back then. Well, yeah, he still uses the nickname Jim Turn.
Yeah,
which is funny, because now he's definitely not an intern. And yeah, he's done great things.
Yeah. And so CC Hyper, who's mainly driven this source code release, you probably don't know him then, because I think he's only been working for EA as of recent.
Yeah, I don't know him.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, the next question on my list was, do you keep in contact with any of the old devs? But you've already kind of answered that. You have this Facebook group. Is everybody on there? Are they from the old team?
I think the majority of everyone is there.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like an EALA alum group, but it's the RTS group specifically.
Okay.
Like Jim posted that the source code dropped.
Okay.
The open source stuff, and we had some funny comments in there. And actually, there was this really funny guy named Graham Smallwood, and he's a teacher now. But I saw this one comment where it was like, it was the worker unit, and it was like, holy fuck, this is a worker is like a troop transport and
yeah,
something else.
I saw that. I saw it. It's a dozer and a truck, a supply collector all in one. Holy fuck, as Vinny said.
Yeah. So I'm sure his students will see that, and then they'll have a lot more respect for him, because that was just a cool comment.
Yeah, so I know you're obviously in the Community Outpost Discord channel. Are you in there? Probably, I guess, not to support in any way with the community patch, or I imagine you're too busy, especially searching for a new role right now.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I have a family and a mortgage, and I need to find my next job, which is taking up my time. But I'm also, I've dedicated myself to Unreal 5. I've been using it exclusively since it came out,
Okay.
And I plan to keep it that way. But in the meantime, I'm interviewing with various companies, but I'm also working on an indie project, just a side project, and I'm using it to learn new techniques and basically just practice everything. I'm a total generalist now, so I've worked on pretty much everything.
Given that you work on Unreal Engine 5 then, which is obviously an amazing engine, if someone gave you enough money and enough time and the source code for 0 hour, how long would that take you to get it into Unreal Engine 5, or is it an impossibility?
So the biggest issue will be the licensing, because to do a proper remaster,
let's say hypothetically,
EA would have to sponsor it, and it would have to be a project that could be sold for money. Microsoft did that with a lot of the RTS games, and I was responsible for Age of Mythology too, like the Age of Myth. resurrecting it from the archive and basically updating it to work on the compilers and DirectX and all that kind of stuff. The team that I was running was, I think, there was 2 engineers initially. We ended up getting, I think it was up to like 7 or 8 by the end, and we were working with a group called Forgotten Empires, which was a modding group for Age of Empires and Myth and stuff. So they worked on all the content and the DLC, and then we supported them from an engineering standpoint. But yeah, getting those games resurrected, it's probably, to do a proper port like of 0 Hour to Unreal 5, I would guess probably about 5 engineers for a year and a bunch of content people. We'd have to get all the source assets as well, and then basically rebuild them. All the particle systems, VFX would have to be done from scratch because I remember the tool that we had for generals was, it was custom and proprietary, and I don't know how well that's aged, but in Unreal, we'd have to do it all over again.
Okay.
So I think it would take about a year to do it with a team of maybe 12.
My expectation is if a game would be remade in Unreal, that it would no longer be the game that we know, right? It would look different in ways like you said, like the particles would have to be remade, so the particle effects would look different. They might look better, but the things will look different, right, in ways. So yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say. Like, will it be? Maybe it might be just all better. Right? It could be, right? But it might lose some charm. Maybe, I don't know. It's hard for me to judge. We would have to see it, right? But I mean, the graphics of 0 Hour, they're probably quite a bit dated, but they're not bad either. And I think we can probably improve that also as well over time. But I think players are not so upset about the visuals of the game. I think overall the players are fine with how the game looks, right? The biggest problems are stability, performance, and lack of a bunch of features that would be good to have, right? These are the big things, right? But I think graphics is not it's not a big deal. I don't think so. I would expect that if you just make the upgrades to Unreal Engine, yeah, and you like rework all the things so that everything runs in Unreal and so on, right? If you just do that versus an effort that just focuses on fixing stability, bugs, gameplay problems, right? Like the stuff that is specific to the game and that players complain about. If you have these 2 efforts, I think that the one that focuses on stability and the bug fixes and so on, that this will be more interesting for more players. And the Unreal Engine part, that will be more interesting for newspapers and for trailers and for YouTube content and yeah, just like for visuals, for the people who like the visuals, because visuals always sell. Visuals sell video games because this is what you can show the people. But the gameplay is what keeps the players entertained and engaged. And I think the gameplay in the end will always win. If the goal is to not just have great sales numbers, but players returning to the game and, populating the servers and, enjoying it for a long, long time, right? But obviously the best probably would be both, right? You improve the graphics and also you improve the game, right? So if you have both, then that's probably the best. But if you would just choose between the Unreal upgrade and fixing the game up, then I would certainly prefer fixing the game up. It's much more important. Yeah. That's my opinion. Maybe someone else sees it differently and says, hey, it's so important, it must run in Unreal Engine, otherwise I won't touch that thing. I don't know that person. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe it is such a big deal. And if 0 Hour ran in Unreal Engine, maybe then it would 10x the player count on its own. Maybe that's the thing. I don't know. But I would assume that the gameplay is king at the end of the day. Yeah. Players want a stable game.
Okay, that's really interesting. Yeah, I don't know if even if it would like play the same, being a completely different engine. Is just I saw someone raise the topic. Just thought I'd ask about it. Do you think we'll ever see a Generals remake or a remaster? Obviously, there was Generals 2, kind of failed project. Don't know if you have any comments on that as well.
Before he answers, my opinion on this is no, because the source code was released. So I don't think there will be a remaster. At least not from EA. But I do expect that if we continue our work in the community, that we will make a remaster pretty much ourselves, built upon the original game. But we can improve all the audio, all the art, everything, right? So the game can be made prettier and more polished. So I think we are well capable, and it's already on their way to be remastered, so to say. Like when I think like of all the audio fixes we have and the texture fixes, and there are other projects that also do lots of model fixes, which are now not in the community patch, not yet. But yeah, the certainly the ambition is there to fix all aspects of this game and improve all aspects of the game, right? And I think that you can technically call that a remaster. It's not a EA remaster, right? It's by employed, paid developers and artists and so on. But that does not mean that it's less of a product, I would say. You can absolutely gather enough competence in community works to polish things well. And yeah, I totally see that happening right now. And it has been ongoing for a couple of years already. So I think we will see a remaster, but not from EA. Yeah. So, and obviously it's an opinion, like, okay, what is actually a remaster? Like, what scope? But for me, I have a good understanding of what problems 0 Hour has, and I have a pretty good vision of what it should be. Yeah. So for me, like, I have a clear vision that 0 Hour can see absolutely better days. Yeah, it can be more beautiful, can be more feature rich, it can be more stable, right? So there's a lot that we can do, especially now after the source code release, and there's a lot we will do, and it should only get better from here. Yeah, I think so. So I think we will see a remaster, but not from EA. Let's see what he says. He probably would just talk about like EA. I don't think that he will see community works as a remaster, but we will see.
I don't know. I think EA, like back when we were working on these games, all the games were successful, but compared to the titans like FIFA and so forth, I think it was relatively small potatoes. Medal of Honor was really big and popular, but our games were profitable, but probably not profitable enough. And that was kind of what led to, the end of making RTS games at EA. Since C4 was the final game they worked on, I was already gone by then. And yeah, it was kind of a sad ending to working on those. But it was such a great team. Even now, like, it's been over 20 years. We still talk about like how it was the best team we've ever.
Okay.
And I also, yeah. So, like, I'd say the last year and a half that I was working at EA, I was doing a lot of pre-production. So we had this one time where I forget the specific games, that may have been like GoldenEye, Battle for Middle-earth 1 maybe, and a Medal of Honor game as well. The studio shipped all 3 games super close together, and there was nothing for people to move on to. So there were some layoffs at the time, and it was just a bit of a flood. And so they were like, okay, we need to pay closer attention to this. So they came up with this technique of, I think it was like 5% of people were working on games that were more than 2 years out, and 20 to 25% were working on games that were between 1 and 2 years out. And then the rest of the studio was working on games that were less than a year out. So the idea was really to seed new projects and have them ready to go when other titles launch. And that's a challenge I've seen in a lot of game companies where, that forward planning isn't happening well enough. And you're also seeing lots of layoffs because it's like, you get this big expensive team, they ship the game, but they don't have enough money to keep it going. And then they have to lay off a lot of people and then start a new project with a smaller team. And that's kind of the problem with things. But yeah, so I got to work directly with Lewis Castle, who's essentially the godfather of RTS games. He is by far the best leader I've ever had.
Okay, wow.
Very, very experienced, very clear, like, just he knows what makes games tick, and he was just really awesome to work with.
Okay.
And he would, if he had feedback, his feedback was amazing. Like, nobody ever got offended by his feedback. Some people can get really defensive if it's like, oh, I designed this thing, and you'll get some other designer that says, oh, this isn't fun. But Lewis would never do that. He was always like, what do you think if we looked at it this way?
Okay.
And yeah, so he was brilliant.
What was his last name again? Sorry, Lewis
Castle.
Lewis Castle. Okay.
The founder of Westwood.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know his name, to be honest.
I also don't know this name. Interesting. Okay, so he was a very diplomatic guy by the sound of it, and probably a calm talker. Yeah. It indeed is a problem. Like when you give feedback in the wrong way, then you can absolutely offend someone. Yeah, so it's important to be considerate the way you word your feedback, to not be frustrated about giving this feedback. When you see like the status quo of something, that you don't be frustrated about it. And I think I personally struggle with this myself. I do get frustrated when I see things. I think so. I'm probably not a good feedback giver, but I'm conscious about it, and I probably try my best, but probably not to the level that the Louis Castle would do. The way he described it, that everyone was happy to work with him and loved his feedback. Yeah, I don't think I'm quite there. Yeah. I mean, I just the last days we got the feedback from Helmut Buhler that he was not quite happy with one of my comments on his comments, right? So yeah, I receive feedback that my way to give feedback is too pedantic. That was the feedback that I got. I'm too pedantic, and I see that. I see that, and I agree with that, but I can't help it. Yeah, I know that I'm pedantic, but and it's probably a detriment in some way. Like it probably costs time. When I'm pedantic, then it costs time. But the flip side is probably that it elevates quality in some ways. Maybe not, with a common story that's not really linking to quality, right? But I'm pedantic about other things. So, for example, people have been not very happy with my map reviews. Like when I review when I reviewed the ranked maps in the past, like I found so many things wrong with these things, and I just raised all these things. So they were like things, we classified them as blockers, those things that would block the release, and issues that were not blockers. And it was around 50-50, right? So 50% were blocker bugs because there were like imbalances or things not working or performance issues on the map, right? So these would be blockers. And then there would be like minor issues where, you cannot crush this tree, or units can drive through this large rock, or hide inside of it, right? So these might be like just like nice to have it fixed. And the feedback there was, I'm too pedantic on this. But in the end, and I think no one can argue with that, in the end, when everything is reviewed and everything is fixed, that people will see that the quality is raised because of that, right? So the upside is that the quality is raised, but it makes it more painful to work towards it. It's easier to not receive any feedback and just go ahead, right? But then you are responsible for the quality on your own, right? There's no one to help you. And it's probably, I would say, a team effort will always win over the efforts of an individual, unless that individual is outrageously good, makes no mistakes, and it's just a super high performer, right? And a team would actually slow him down, right? So, but that's probably rare. It's probably big teams will probably outperform any high performer on his own, right? Like, or there's actually also the case that you can have like a high performer in a company, but maybe this high performer is actually slowing down the team, right? In ways, right? So maybe he gets a lot of stuff done, but maybe only he himself can then maintain the stuff, because the stuff that he pumps out is, really fast and all, and does give functionality, but only he can maintain that thing, right? And no one else can really iterate on it or use it, and that one person needs to cater to everything then on his own, and maybe that in turn slows everything down, right? Yeah. Anyway, let's hear about Louis Castle.
Okay.
Yeah. No, he's awesome.
Okay. I think you'll say no to this one. If what's the chances of you installing General's 0 Hour and playing against someone? Let's say I got you a sponsored match. Let's say $100. What's the chances we could see you in a match?
I'd do it. I don't care about the money at all. It'd be just for fun. I totally suck. I haven't played the game in over 20 years, so.
Okay.
So I'd have to install it and play a couple matches and get my bearings again. But I've never been particularly good at competitive RTS games. I remember when Generals and 0 Hour came out, like we'd always play against the public for the first few days. It was like, how long can you last before you get crushed?
Yeah.
And for me it was like 3 days. And I had like a year of experience playing the game all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then it comes out and people just learn from replays, and boom, it did not take long.
Yeah.
But internally I was on the I guess I was never the best, but I was pretty close. Like I always got owned by Greg Black and a guy named Gavin Simon. And Gavin, he's had a really good career. He was one of the founders of Supergiant, working on the Hades games.
Okay.
And a few of the EALA RTS group went there after everything. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Hopefully, we'll see you online once, but at least at one time. But it sounds like you have got other priorities. You've got a family. You've got a job to find. So we understand if you're too busy. Totally understand.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to answer questions and point people in the right direction. Like, you can think of me as a consultant
Yeah.
or an advisor. So that's probably the best way I can help for now.
Yeah. If there's any game companies watching this that are interested in hiring you or working with you, I don't even know if this is the right platform, or is there any skills you have that you want to put out there? I mean, I am in touch with a few, actually. I have a few Discord groups, and I'm in touch with probably like 2 or 3 companies, really small ones. And they message me every now and again and ask my feedback or ask me to play test something. So I suppose some people might be watching it. I don't know if this will help you in any way. Is there anything you want to say to any of those people?
Sure. Like I said, I've been a generalist, which means I work on everything. Supporting the game. I always make the joke that I'm a designer trapped in a programmer's body. Before I got into games, I wanted to be a game designer, but I also gravitated to computers and programming, and got my first job as a programmer. So I've always been a programmer, and that's kind of how it goes. And I don't regret any of that. But I've always been very close to gameplay, and I'd say for the last 15 years, I've been a generalist working on almost everything except gameplay. Like core features and engines and plugins and that kind of stuff. Yeah, so I've only been considering Unreal 5 positions.
Okay.
And I like growing teams. I've managed teams from like 5 to 12 people for the most part, and then biggest team I've ever managed was 60 people.
60.
Yep, that was
Okay.
crazy.
Yeah, I bet.
And the more people you manage, the less hands-on you can be. So I enjoy a balance of both.
Yeah.
And I also really like working with juniors, and it's kind of a really sad thing right now is it's really hard for people to get their foot in the door. But yeah, I think there's a lot of wasted opportunities. There needs to be more people, running small groups and training juniors up, because otherwise we're just going to have a total brain drain in the future.
I just thought of one more thing. So next month, probably one of the closest games to Command & Conquer, Tempest Rising, is coming out. I don't know if you've looked at that at all or had any thoughts on it.
No, this is the first I've heard of it.
Okay. Yeah, check that out then. Type into Google Tempest Rising, and it's a bit like, definitely inspired by Command & Conquer. Instead of GDI, they have GDF.
Okay.
Yeah, check that out.
All right.
I'm surprised you've not heard of that, actually.
No, there's so many games being worked on.
Yeah. I suppose, for the Command & Conquer community, it's the closest thing to Command & Conquer that's coming new. And that's supposed to come
it really
out
does have. It really does have that look.
Okay, I think I will end it here because he's not talking about 0 Hour anymore. Stormgate, thank you, Kris, outro. Yeah, so we can skip that in the next 3 minutes. Yeah, I think it was an interesting interview. He touched on some technical points, some general topics. Yeah. I think Dominator lost his initial nervousness pretty quickly. Yeah. I think there probably was potential for some more juicy questions here and there, but I think overall it hit the interesting questions. Maybe I think I would have liked more technical sections, but then it's harder to digest for the average viewer. So yeah, I think, yeah, the technical parts are most relevant for developers, right? But yeah, it's then the average user, average viewer won't understand much, and then that's probably not that interesting. Yeah. But yeah, I think it was a pretty well balanced interview. It was interesting to hear his thoughts on things. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, how long was the session? Yeah, 2 hours 19. Oh, then I talked as much as they did. Okay. Yeah. Good. Then there's also another interview here that dropped 21 hours ago. Interview with 0 Hour developer Mark Lorenzen. I haven't seen that either yet. We can probably also make a video about that the same way, but it's quite long, 2 hours 14. Oof. If we have the same pace, then that would take 4 hours. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed. You can, of course, I will put the link to the original video if you just like to watch the original, and you probably have seen it already anyway. It was posted 1 month ago. I haven't seen it before. Now for me, it was the first time. Yeah, it was interesting. Yeah, then I will take a break here. I wish you a great day or night until next time. Goodbye.